birth and holistic peer counseling. And today with me is my mom, Kathryn Julia, who I often blame for all the trouble I get myself into. Um, so today, what I want to talk about with my mom, Kathryn Julia, who lives in Hawaii and I'm in Seattle, and she's been teaching massage for over 30 years and has been a doula and a doula educator for half that time, would you say, Mom?
Since '99.
Okay. Yeah, about half that time. So, what we really want to discuss today is the topic of trauma in birth, and as a birth worker, how we see the necessity for us to have tools and an understanding of birth trauma if we're going to do birth work. Um, I would say that a lot of why I came up with embodied birth and holistic peer counsel and utilized holistic peer counseling in it came from being your daughter and hearing lots of the stories that I heard throughout your career working with women around childbirth. And it seemed to be very important that there be a piece for the birth workers to be able to work out all the triggers and difficulties that come up in a birth. And we, as birth workers, always want to be there, just being purely there for the mother and the baby and the family, but we walk away and it has impacted us. And it seemed necessary that there be something to address that, and I found that holistic peer counseling could create a community for us to be able to work on that aspect of things so that we can show up better for our clients. And then what also I find is happening is then we have those tools to help our clients as well when they're working through the difficulties of their birth, the things that maybe they didn't go the way that they wanted them to go, or even as we're doing prenatal care, the things that help them come to terms with their options and their choices and help them come up with the most empowered choice that they can make within their given situation. So I wanted to do some videos with different birth workers that I know understand these things in the work that they're doing, and hopefully we can talk a little bit about it and share with others that are looking at getting into birth work or who haven't thought about this aspect of their birth work on why do you think it's important to have tools around birth trauma and birth recovery as you're being a birth worker out in the world.
It's really interesting. I mean, great lead in because it's as you're talking, I'm thinking about, why do any of us need tools to be able to continue to do something that we really, really love to do and we have a lot of passion for, like birth, like parenting, like marriage, like our careers, all of it. It's like if we all I know is that in my doula training, there was never a mention of birth trauma. It was only going out into the front lines and really starting to be there, not even considering birth trauma, and then walking away and being absolutely floored by the trauma that I was experiencing, what I was watching happen to women. And what I really feel helped me be able to even tune into that was because of 20 years of body work and working with people and helping them release traumas from their bodies and how, and so that would affect the rest of their life. I mean,
What was that first experience for you when you came out of your doula training? Do you have a memory of what that was like for you? I know it was a while ago, but you were talking about how you got your doula training and then you went out there ready to be a doula, and then you sort of got smacked in the face with these things that you had to then look back and figure out in your toolkit and figure out how to cope with and deal with.
Right. Well, at my very first birth that I attended was 25 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And it was in a military hospital. And it was pretty, I was not as much of an activist at the time. I was much more of an observer and holding the space for her. And I remember after it, I spoke with my mentor as a doula, Barbara Esmond, and I said, you know, we talk about birth being so sacred, but my experience was, where is the sacredness in this? You know, as I watched just the whole medical procedure and all the IVs, and it didn't feel like something sacred. And she goes, "That's what we're there for. We're there to hold that sacred space." And that totally jumped me to a whole new level of what my purpose was. And of course, it totally turned me on too because I loved it. So then that made me realize, you know, as I continued to do births, I would realize that after a birth, that I needed to prepare myself for a birth by a lot of self-care and to start really like meditating on the mom and what the birth was about and, you know, where we were going and visualizing the perfect, you know what I mean? And then so preparation for the birth as well as just being able to be there for her. And without my stuff, being able, at the time of the birth, being able to separate what was my trauma and my triggers and what was really happening with her. So that was another tool to that, again, I thank 20 years of body work for. That understanding. And then after the birth, you know, that I needed recovery time. That wasn't like you just go in and you just hop back into your everyday life, but I needed recovery time, you know, so I got my little recovery rituals like my lavender bath and meditating and drinking chicken pho and, you know, just the things that I needed to do to replenish myself. And then I could turn around and then help her with what was going on for her after the birth. Was she totally blissed out and completely happy with everything? Or was she experiencing some pain behind it? Or was denial going on because she thinks she's supposed to be happy and blissed out, but she's really freaking out inside, you know? So it's really boiled down to being able to use things like meditation, massage, hydrotherapy, essential oils, things that help me to prepare myself for all those phases of the process.
So
none of it was anything that I was told about in the 3-day doula training I took.
Right. I mean, I remember when you gave me the doula training, and I then was going to my first birth, and I called you, and I was like, seriously? And that, again, was with my long background in body work and having already birthed my own child. And, yeah, it was very eye-opening for me to understand that for most doulas, they are getting that training and then stepping into those shoes and having that experience, and what tools do they fall back on. Hopefully they have them, right? So I hear a really important thing that you're talking about, which you know is important to me, which is our ability to be able to tell the difference between our own stuff and their stuff. But there's another piece, which is the piece of the secondary trauma. It's the piece of, you know, I hear that a lot of the tools that you were putting them together specifically so that you could be of better service to the families that you were being of service to. But what pieces were in place for you, or do you feel like you're yet to really find the pieces to help you really be able to deal with the stuff that does come up for you? Where do you go with the things that, you know, for instance, if you watch somebody be treated poorly and it reminds you of something in your past, and then all of those emotions and those feelings come up for you, where do you go with that? And has a lack of resource around being able to process that impacted your work as a birth worker, you think?
Yeah, the lack of resources, definitely, because I've, you know, semi-retired or temporarily retired from doing birth work. Part of it has to do with, raising Sean and not having the child care that I need. But a big part of it is I like that excuse because I don't want to go back into the hospitals, you know. But it's just
Can you say more about why that is?
the abuse that I see, the lies that I hear told to women, the the actual physical abuse. You know, the last birth I was at, I feel like I watched this doctor rape this woman. You know, it was just, and I was myself. What was triggering me was being paralyzed from my sexual abuse. Being paralyzed when I was sexually abused. You know, then that feeling came up as I was watching him do that to her, and trying to, okay, get out of the paralysis, because the paralysis is me in history, and now step forward and be able to at least put your hands on her and calm her. Because, you know, the position of the doula in the hospital, you cannot tell the doctor, stop it. You know, you got to just watch this go on and try to just reduce as much stress around it as possible.
Mhm.
You know, so yeah, and I felt like, and I had a couple other, like within the same year, I had two really heavy duty births, and it just felt like the, the, the previous, the one before that was one where I watched just the doctor, and her ego was so enormous, and she had so right that a lot of damage happened to the baby, you know, and it was just, and a lot of the negative energy of the mother then went towards me. The mother and the doctor started to side with each other, kind of, and then it was, you know, my influence was causing all this problem, you know, and it was like I didn't like that. I didn't like that aspect of it at all. So I pretty much, it was a year and a half before I did a birth after that one,
Yeah.
you know, and why is I recognized it was my trauma. I recognize that it's really hard for me to go watch someone be abused. And what I had to do is remember the really awesome births that I've been at, where I've seen just awesome teamwork and the sacred space be so prevalent, you know. But these other two kind of kicked me on my butt. And yeah, I feel like I just needed to do a lot of self-healing. And what's really helped me is by you bringing me back into the work through holistic peer counseling and having that community to totally support me when I just go blah, you know, and I can be real and not have to scream what I am feeling so it doesn't upset the other person I'm talking to.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? That is because what's real for you is real for you. And if you can't get in touch with that and voice that, then you just start building barriers, and I don't like that.
Right.
So,
That was a
and
lot.
cool, I look forward to doing a birth again, and if it's a hospital birth, in fact, I've been faced with one that's going to be, you know, possibly, it will be incredibly challenging. You know, there's a lot of obstacles and stuff, and I almost am enjoying the approach that I'm taking with this mom. I'm just seeing come out of me just from getting rid of all that other stuff, you know, and taking time to give myself more care and more love, you know.
Well, that was a lot to share. That's a lot, and it's a lot, and you know, and I know, I mean, you and I get to lead on each other, which is fabulous and unique. And I've had other people in the birth world tell me they envy our connection, which is so that helps remind me of how unique it is. But the truth is in many ways, I feel like you are very isolated around those experiences as they happen to you. And so that, you know, that is what you're speaking to in the peer counseling community, is being able to have somewhere where you don't have to feel isolated um, after it happens, and you're not being evaluated, right? It's not like someone's going to come in there and say, "Well, come on, Kathy, get over your trauma from your childhood already." right? We're going to sit there and be there for you and in whatever those triggers are that come up. And you're seeing, right, we just watched another birth worker go back into the birth room after she thought that she was never going to be able to. And it's been a lot of work. It's, I feel like bringing the tools of recovery and marrying them to birth is just such a powerful combination for recovering aspects of our life we didn't even realize we're still frozen inside
But
ourselves, right? Because
and you know me, I've been doing this work for years and years and years and years, and initially it was put out, so, oh, you do this and all your karma will be gone, you won't have any more buttons to be pushed, and that's not been my experience, because as you go through life, you have more experiences and more buttons get pushed, and there was a lot of minutes of childhood development and experiences. And even though it might be the same trigger, say the same trigger goes off, each time it's milder and there's greater understanding, there's more forgiveness, and so it's not like you're going to get over it in one barf, so to speak, but that opens the door. And speaking of opening the door, that's what I felt like, when I look back on it, the doula training is. It just is something that opened the door and got you to go in there. And you're pretty much on your own. And I feel like in my community over here, there is not a support group. None of us. I don't feel like there's a support group at all for being able to process. I mean, we all kind of have this belief that after a birth you need to debrief.
right.
But, yeah, and that sort of helps. But there's no group to go to. Everybody's so busy doing their own thing and just wrapped up in their own stuff. You know what I mean? If anything brings us together here, it's when the legislature is trying to do something to, trash the profession.
You're
But
reminding me of someone who took peer counseling a while ago was a Sufi, and actually Amara, who is part of our lineage of holistic peer counseling, is a Sufi herself. And so this one student was saying that her Sufi teacher calls it the inconvenient work.
yeah,
That this work is the inconvenient work, and yet it's the work that does allow us to work. It allows us to continue doing the more convenient work, I guess.
right. And that's what in the beginning what I was saying, so we can continue on the work that we're so passionate with. When I looked at the question like, why do birth workers need tools to help work with birth trauma, my short answer was so they don't burn out.
Right.
Because if you burn out. I watch it. I see it in the massage therapy profession when people don't take care of themselves and work with what they've absorbed or what their work has brought up for them. If they don't look at that aspect of it, they burn out. They move on. They do something else.
I was having a conversation with someone that I did the pre-med post-bac program with at Columbia yesterday, actually, and I was talking about my PTSD recovery, and I was saying, it's not, I don't think, the way that I experience it is really that I got bigger than my trauma.
Yeah.
That the recovery allowed me to get bigger than my trauma. It's not like that went away.
Right. Exactly.
To that when you talk about people think they're just going to purge it all out and it'll be gone. It's more like as I've worked recovery, I've gotten so big that this piece of my story is now just a piece of my story, where right after it happened, it was my story, right? It was my life.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so the way in the systems that I worked is like the more you work it, the less charge it has. It didn't not exist, but it just doesn't have all that charge anymore.
Yeah.
It doesn't have that zzz,
Well,
and
I'm
like
excited.
you get bigger than it. It's just a part of the tapestry then.
Yeah. Yeah, it's not like it goes away. I feel like sometimes people get lost in a I just want to not feel that anymore, or I just want to not remember that anymore. and that hasn't been my experience. My experience has been that I become bigger than it.
Yeah,
And I can,
that's a put it.
which I find helps me to be able to have empathy for the people that are going through the trauma. It doesn't, as others come through that are working on their own trauma, I don't have to step away because I can't handle it. It's more, oh, right, this is when I have to get this big because the trauma is this big. And
Well,
I,
exactly.
yeah,
That's what gives us our ability to have empathy.
right,
You know, because then we know what that person's experiencing. We're experiencing it in our feeling body, but it's not paralyzing us.
right, exactly. Well, I'm excited that and I know that you're on your road with you let me know that there was a new prenatal that you just had, and you'll have us there for you as you take your steps, and hopefully you'll lean on us if you start to get triggered. You'll come into the peer counseling community and let us help you move it through as it comes up. Because I know, the other, like you said, to not get burnt out, like we as a society lose all your wisdom and all your experience when these experiences happen that are emotionally overwhelming and too taxing on your system to be able to keep showing up doing the really incredible work I know you do.
Well, I will. I'll be right there.
Okay, well, is there any last thing you want to say before we close up?
Just that this work is the awesomeness of this work is it makes us work on ourselves. If you love it so much, you really this is your passion. The best way to feed that passion is to keep taking care of yourself in all aspects of yourself. Don't let yourself get lost in denial and isolation.
Thanks, Mom.
I love you.
I love you too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.